when you get into that like stinky, slimy stuff that you don't want other people to see about you, it's like, actually, that's the most rich fodder for, you get so much power out of that. You get so much power out of realization of clarity that comes out of your anger, like the boundaries, the clarity that comes from anger. You get so much realization out of the depth that you go to when you can allow yourself to experience grief. You get so much more compassion and understanding. It just makes you a fucking powerful human being that is relatable and wise, and you see so much more when you can allow yourself to experience all these different human experiences.
So Katie, welcome to the show, and
Thank you.
Thank you for carving out time in your, sounds very busy schedule. Now for people, I've been trying, you're kind enough to send me some samples of these incredible flower essences, which I've been trying now for 2 months, and it's amazing to notice the difference of how I feel. There's a real lightness to how I feel since taking, I took the quiz where I looked at all the different flowers and chose the ones which I resonated with. And it's just crazy the difference I feel from taking these. Do you define them as extracts or essences? What's the correct?
Essences, elixirs, remedies.
Elixirs. Okay. Yeah, and I've gone through a particularly stressful period, and yet I've remained very grounded and calm. And I do another number of other practices, but these definitely, I've noticed a significant difference. They also taste amazing. So I don't know what the hell you're putting in them, but like, I just want to take this little bottle and scull the whole thing. Rather than tell you that it's really quite difficult to just take 4 or 5 drops. But look, for people who don't know your work and how you came to selling these incredible flower elixirs, what is the story of how you discovered this?
I was living in Mexico. I was studying as many forms of natural medicine that I could get my hands on, and I was looking for something to unlock people's potential. Because everywhere I looked around me, I saw brilliant human beings in subtle ways held back by their own, self-limiting patterns. So I was really on the hunt for something natural that would help us all sort of awaken faster into our greatness. I ended up stumbling into an expert from Spain. He had been working with flower essences for decades. I studied with him, and he essentially taught me 2 main things. One, that every flower on the planet has a really specific benefit for humans on a psycho-spiritual, mental, emotional level. And I just thought that was so cool. And the second thing he said was that if we could get 3% of the world's population using these essences regularly, it would create enough momentum and ripple effect that it would change the outcome of the future of our planet. And he wasn't, although he wasn't specific about what that looked like, it really resonated deeply with me. And I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this for the rest of my life. And I can bring this back to the United States. And that was in like 2000. So it's been quite a road, coming back into the country after living several years abroad and traveling and thinking like, this is going to be great. Like the Americans are going to be so into this. And,
Yeah.
meditation wasn't cool then. Yoga wasn't even cool in 2000. So it gave me like a huge time opportunity to put in my 20,000 hours for the first 10 years working with people one-on-one and honing my intuition and recognizing what were the issues that most humans were dealing with at the time and what were the flowers that people needed and gravitated to most. And then beginning to learn to collect my own flower essences. That was the first decade. The second decade was more like, how do I teach myself how to be an entrepreneur? How do I do marketing and selling and accounting and all those crazy things so that I could scale to reach more people? And since then, it's just been an incredible unfolding of complexity and depth and profound connections.
It's so interesting, those 2 skill sets, because you could have the most amazing product or solution, let's put it, solution's a better word than product, in the world. But if you don't have that second piece of knowing how to market it, it's so frustrating when you see the rubbish that does get sold or it's doing really well in so many different spaces because they're genius marketers. Yet the stuff that I find, where we've got lots of markets where I live, and there's people who just make lots of different home remedies for things, and they're done with love and they're done with the purest ingredients, and but they're clearly like they're just passionate about the product development, but don't know anything about how to get it to sell it. And it's such a that is, as you said, that's a decade in and of itself just to learn that skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah, at, at least.
And hiring and firing and growing
Yeah,
a
oh my
team
God.
and
Yeah.
language. I mean, even in the beginning, it was like I had to scrub my vocabulary of certain words because the culture just wasn't ready to have a conversation about energy or quantum physics or frequency or, all those words have been scrubbed. And our strategy at the time was really just to make it about the person. And we've kind of stuck with that, as you've
Mm,
seen. It's like, okay, Paul, which flowers are you most drawn to? And that in itself has been a cool experience of reteaching people or reminding us all that we actually know what we need, that we don't need a doctor in a white coat to say what needs
mm,
tweaking in us, that we will naturally, as humans with our innate intelligence, be drawn to what is most beneficial for us in the moment. And it already, that experience of doing the quiz amplifies this sense of, oh, right, like I own this connection with Mother Nature. There is a dialogue here. We are in communication, even if I'm not intellectually aware of it.
mm. I love that part of that quiz that you send because it's such an intuitive process that people can be, I don't want to say passive, but it makes it very, you know what you're drawn to instantly. Like people, despite the confusion that particularly in the medical field, in the Western medical field, will try and espouse in terms of your health is out of your hands. We need to give you basically trust us. And I don't want to, I rag on this podcast. It sounds like I'm not entirely anti-West. I think it's brilliant for certain things. And I think we're all hyper aware also of what it's not so good at. But the simplicity of looking at these gorgeous images of flowers and just being like, I like, I'm just drawn. You don't, without any pressure. You just click on what you're drawn to, and then it will give you the elixirs that are best suited. Yeah, it's that knowledge is in us though. We all have. We come into this world with a certain level of awareness.
Yeah, it's speaking to that. You don't have to read, 400 pages of the encyclopedia. You don't have to study the flowers. You don't have to do a PhD. You have this inherent knowingness inside of you that comes with you as you're born into this world. Like,
Mm,
how brilliant is that? There's
yeah.
this part of you that is so wise and so huge and so great and so knowing. It's that knowingness. It's not even knowledge. You didn't accumulate it. You came with it.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
really speaking to that place in you. We're just like cut away all of the things and filters and ways you've grown up and where you're from. Just cut that all away and like go right straight to the heart of who you are. That's who
Mm.
we're having a conversation with the flowers.
Isn't that the underlying principles of all of the Eastern mystics who have awakened will always just say that the idea of the seeker is hilarious. We're always seeking on, particularly in the Western culture of like growing. Like you hear it now, it's all growth, it's all advancement, but yet the awareness of our true being is ever present, and it's that is actually, but it's so covered up with everything else. It's very difficult, and it's sort of so simple. It's almost the simplicity of that teaching is uh, we don't want to think that it's simple. Yet when you present these images, it's yeah, it goes as you said, it goes straight to the heart of that knowing that we have.
Yeah, and I think more recently I've been describing it as like the 21 grams of you. So like when our consciousness leaves this
Yeah.
temporary temple of a body, flesh body, right? So what our consciousness leaves the body, scientists have weighed it, and the consciousness weighs approximately 21 grams. And this whole flesh body expression, right, is a compilation of all the causes and conditions and things that we've created throughout time to now be expressed like this. And those 21 grams then, come in and move out. And that is the most important part of you that we care about. So with the flower essences, we are directly talking to those 21 grams of you. And places like we can talk about cellular memory, or we can talk about experiences that you've had in this life, or ancestral patterns or traumas, or collective consciousness things. All of those are contained within the 21 grams of the most
Mm.
essential part of you that flower essences are enhancing.
This may be, I'm not sure if this is going to be a difficult question. I'm gonna throw it at you and see, because I've asked a few people. Look, I'll frame it in this is what I feel when it comes to particularly the water we drink, number one, and then the foods we eat. All these are signaling to our consciousness and bringing forth in us more awareness. And when we're covered up with toxicity, which is in most foods and most water, if we just go off what the government's telling us to do. So, God, I got to stop with that. Not what the guy, like, whatever, however, whatever wormhole you want to go down. Who's to blame for why the world is the way it is? It might just be us individually, each one of us. But the but what I've seen is when you and experienced personally is that obviously when you change those things, your awareness naturally begins to grow and you become more. It becomes this really what's the word, syntropic wheel of where you become more and more excited about what's possible for you because you start opening up. Is that how, uh, particularly when you're working, dealing with one-on-one and you're giving people these flower essences, is that how you think it is working mechanistically or intuitively, that it just started opening up just for people within their consciousness? Or is there something even more going on within just the body and nature and the cells? Sorry, I gave you that's a big.
I mean, take me in another direction if you want to go in another direction, but there's so much happening. I mean, it's
Yeah. No, I'd love to hear you go for it. Yeah.
so the first part, I think to address the first part of your question, it's like the flower essence is kind of, I see them as like door openers. They open the door. The human being has to walk through the door. I will never
Mm.
tell people, oh, just take flower essences and you'll become enlightened. That's
Yeah,
not
that's what
true.
yeah.
Yeah. So flower essences are like, they're like a pointing out instruction. Like, hey, check this out here. Hey, look in your blind spot here. Hey, did you know that there's something over here? And when that's been pointed out, now you have the information enough to say, ooh, do I want to change that? Do I want to make a different move? Do I want to go in a different direction? Also, I like to think of it in terms of energetics. So, like, what they never tell us in science class, that we have this giant crystal in the middle of our head, the pineal gland, and that we have
Mm.
nanocrystalline structures in the fluids of our body. And that when we introduce a flower essence into our system, it's not like something's happening to us. There is a synergy, and there is a conversation happening in terms of all those little crystalline structures and all, like us as a walking crystal. What do crystals do? They amplify. So the
Mm.
flower essence energy comes in. Our bodies naturally, our energetic system amplifies that particular essence and moves it all around the meridians and nadis and chakras in our body, so that we can not only amplify it for our own energetic body use, but we can also spread it to our loved ones. Um, and like you said, it's kind of like they're stripping away all the things that create static. You can think of it as like modern day static. Like you said, we don't eat at the right times. We've got toxic stuff in our food. We've got EMFs. We've got just like a lot of static and junk, sugar, drugs, weed, all these things, psychedelics, stuff that's like creating fog in our
Mm.
aura or electromagnetic field. So when you remove the static, you can see clearly, you can think clearly, you can perceive more clearly. And then from there, there's like the whole awareness of what is my behavior and what things are in my blind spots that I wasn't aware of. And what happens when I become suddenly aware of something and have the capacity to change it, along with like the cellular memory of 7 to 8 generations back of our family lineage,
Mm.
and of things happening in modern day life that are
Mm.
impacting us because we are part of a collective, as well as every experience we've had from womb until now that creates a filter or a perception or a projection of how we interpret what's happening. None of us actually see reality as it is in an absolute form, right? We see
Mm.
through all these layers and lenses. So flower essences have this incredibly powerful yet gentle way of dissolving the filter so that we can get a little closer to truth. And like you said, that opens up possibilities. If you want to like talk in terms of my past clients or my current community, it could look anything from like, well, shit, I can sleep finally. I couldn't sleep before. Or I just feel like everyone around me is more friendly and loving. Or I look at myself in the mirror every morning and I think, damn, I'm not so bad. And usually when I looked at myself in the mirror, I'm like, God, what's wrong with me? I'm so aging and, thinking all these negative thoughts.
Mm.
Or or like people who have stayed on flower essences consistently over time, like I'm no longer afraid of flying, or I got out of this relationship and entered a new one, or I got a promotion, or things that when we change our inner experience, the outer experience also changes. And that's when you see those big life shifts because we've changed in here. So the way we project out changes, and then everything changes from there.
Mm. There's about three things that you just said that I'd love to. I'm storing them in my mind. But firstly, a comment which is used often in ancient writings, particularly. But if you look where flowers grow and how they flower in the most adverse conditions, regardless of what's happening, you'll see daffodils coming up through cracks in the pavement in huge cities with lots of pollution. And I love that as a metaphor that regardless of what's happening in your life or the circumstances around you, you can still be expressing your beauty and your essence. Uh, and so, sorry, that's just a whimsical comment. Not so whimsical, actually. It's very grounded in truth in terms of that you have that capacity. And then with the clarity piece, yeah, the idea, it's so funny how you see all these arguments everywhere in the world, online, news, different forms of news media, in your own life, asserting that you've got some sort of hold over the clarity and the truth of a matter. And it's just hilarious. It's like none of us are perceiving, like there's no capital T truth. We're all wandering around and making sense of our reality based, as you said, on our cellular memory, on our ancestry, which is in our body, like the trauma of maybe our great grandfather went through is expressing itself as some weird trigger that you have that some random person pressed. It's so there's so many layers to this, but what I love that I've noticed with many practices, but with the flower essences and the word is clarity. You start to be able to see, for me, not so much objective truth out there or seeking that, but more just for me, it's like internally clarity on things that I was doing that I was unaware of and being able to change it because that's how else is anything meant to be changed? I see so many ways that I used to be, but it was because I couldn't see it. And people could tell you that something 20 times or 100 times until you're ready to see it, it's blind to you. So that is, I can't think of a bigger tool for growing. I don't want to get stuck in this trap of growing and not growing, but of just fully expressing yourself and having clarity is the number one thing. And I see so inhibitors to that instead of like say taking flower essences and meditating and doing all these other things. So many short tracks of like let's go to the Amazon and take ayahuasca, or here it's very like lots of people take mushrooms and do all this stuff and go up. And I'm not necessarily. I think there's their tools and they have their place, but I see so many. The problem being, we were talking about India before we came on air, particularly in the West. We don't have a mooring inner lineage which supports this sort of spiritual work, if you want to put it in that language. So when people just dive in and start taking psilocybin and ayahuasca and then come back to the madness and there's actually nothing to hold it, I think it creates more problems than it solves issues. I think I've seen a lot of people become more lost as a result of jumping in the deep end as opposed to gradually letting your awareness open internally.
Yeah, I agree. And I look at the fixation, this kind of modern fixation on 10 plants, whether it's,
Yeah,
wachuma or ayahuasca or mushrooms
yeah,
and I'm thinking, why is there so much fixation on 10 plants when there's, and even if we just look at flowering plants, there's over 40,000 flowering species of plants on the planet. There's hundreds of thousands of other plants that don't create flowers. Each one of those have some unique unlock, for humanity. And like I've already experienced at least, 300 to 400 different flower essences that have shown me things, different aspects of myself. Each one shows me something I've never seen about myself before. then I think, why are we getting stuck on these 10? Especially when it's not something that, babies can consume, or pregnant mamas, or elderly folks, or, toddlers or teenagers. Of
Mm,
course, like you said, I think a lot of people come to it with a pure motivation of like, I want some kind of realization. I want to like
mm,
feel my spiritual capacity. And that's a pure motivation. And there's just so much more that Mother Nature has to offer of her, 4.5 billion years of, rotating around the sun, and being able to offer healing substances. And like you said, that, I think of it in terms of like um the hare and the rabbit, like which, or the rabbit and the,
tor-
what is it, the turtle, the tortoise and the hare,
tortoise. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
which one is faster, and you might think that like, this, big extreme experience and vomiting and diarrhea and stuff is, it's kind of like the rabbit. But if you're doing the turtle mode, from,
yeah.
when you're little all the way until you're in your elder years, that's pretty fast, that's also pretty awesome.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I find too, it gives you a lot. What's that great? I'm not sure if I'm going to get this correct, but say taking psychedelics is kicking a hole in the wall, as opposed to meditating and doing other practices is building a window. So one you have more of a chance to reflect, and it's a gradual process where, and you can integrate. I found you can integrate it, and it's not to say you don't have these profound experiences of insight.
Hmm.
But when it, like I've also done psilocybin, I've done. It's not like I haven't experienced that, but I've in my own experience, I've never come back and been able to. It was just like, whoa, what was that? Like, it's not like I know what it was and I had all these things, but I couldn't put them into my life in a practice.
And
Like,
in the end, just like the flower essences aren't the end all be all, we are.
mm,
The entheogens aren't the end all be all, we are. And they may be showing us windows into certain aspects of ourselves, but it's ultimately us. Like it's our awareness. Like you said, it's our awareness that is guiding everything. In my experience, anything that takes us away from our awareness can create obstacles. Anything that sharpens and brightens and brings more into focus our awareness can, can contribute to a very powerful method of awakening,
mm,
self-awakening.
yeah. I find too, and this is, I don't know how to language this properly, but everything that you desire, you think you want in your life, comes at the point of your awareness, because you may think. So speaking materialistically, if you want to have a successful business and do all these things, and look, you can argue like, why do you want that? What's your mission? Is it to help people? Is it just so you can buy a Bentley and cruise down the street? I'll, nothing wrong with a nice car. That's fine. If you don't drive a Bentley, do you, Katie? Is
No,
that
I
the
do
whole?
not.
Yeah, but you've not done that yet. You might do, but but yeah, I remember hearing a guru say many years ago, like the key to everything, that he was asked about success from the, and he just said the key to everything, he success is your awareness, and it's so fundamentally true. Like everything that you want in your life will enter your life when your awareness can stretch into those areas and see the possible. Because it's just like, what's open for me, what's the possibilities, when bad things, or we call them bad or negative things, happen to us, asking like, what's the gift? What's the opportunity in this? And often the negative thing is a positive thing, vice versa. There's so many, but that all comes from the awareness of changing, say, negative patterns and limiting, as you said, limiting self beliefs that so many of us, all of us, have when we come into this. Well, do we? Do we come into that when we're babies? Do we receive? I don't know. It's a very complex question, but everything. So for me personally, everything in my life now is like, I prioritize things which I know help me open more to life. Uh, yeah. So it's just. So I'm going to ask you a question. So, like, what have you seen with people who have taken the flower essences? Like, what's some of the most astonishing sort of transformations?
Lately, it's been things that have really shocked me, that I wasn't expecting. Because over the years, I mean, I feel like I've seen so
Worked with so
many
many.
different short term and long term. I mean, even just, a woman came into the store a couple months ago and she said, I'm having issues with my period, and I don't have a period, and she's quite young, like 30s.
Mm.
And so we gave her the classic remedy that we have for, regular cycles. It's called radiant energy. It's got the pomegranate flower that's like, this huge gift to women, especially in that arena. And she came back in a couple weeks and said, "Oh my God, I just got my period." And we're like, "Great," And she said, "I no, you don't understand. I haven't had a period in 7 years."
What?
And so in a matter of 2 weeks, like her system just like kicked right in, and away she went. So like there are things like that, and then there are, which is, for me, that's become a little more commonplace because I've seen that so many times over the last couple decades. What's really shocking me lately is we have multiple practitioners on different contents reporting back to us, "Hey, my client who is a child and nonverbal and autistic took this particular remedy and now they're speaking after 1 month." I mean, that's just like, if that doesn't grab you, I mean, I just can't even imagine like how the mother must feel, like, my child is speaking now, and we've had folks come back to us who have relatives who are in their elder years and experiencing some dementia or
Mm.
maybe some cognitive issues, and it's hard to get a sentence together. And they use a particular remedy that we recommend for that now. And, you know, it's easy to put a sentence together. Those were things that I never expected. I knew that they would help people sleep and get over their fears and have better relationships and feel more comfortable in their own bodies and be more clear and successful and strong and confident. And those things were kind of like, you know, knowns to me. I had experienced them in my own system, but when you look at like the rising cases of autism and things that are arising now that weren't so much of an issue 20, 25, 30 years ago, it's such a like gift and blessing to see that something so subtle and gentle can be so powerful in those realms as well.
Have you tried with? Is it possible to measure mechanistically what's going on in the body when someone's taking? I'm just thinking of, obviously
Mhm.
with peer, utilizing this on a larger scale. Like it would be amazing, say, in 30 years that a prescription would be leaning more toward this modality as opposed to what we currently have. I'm just trying to imagine how you'd measure it. So I'm thinking there'll be something going on mechanistically, but equally there's something going on in the consciousness, and those two. And that, how do you measure consciousness?
Yeah, and I've spoken to scientists about, hey, what kind of studies could we do? And it always comes back around to like, self-reported, they'll say, well, it's just the easiest to send someone a remedy, to have them answer a questionnaire, and then they take the remedy, and then
Mm.
4 weeks later they answer how they're feeling, and then we correlate all the information. And I feel like we've done that for so many years. We know they work. When people are skeptical, I'm always welcoming of that. I love skeptics. It's like we actually need more critical thinking. We need more critical thinking on this
Yeah,
planet, right?
do we ever?
We need more questioning. We need people to ask the hard questions, and I welcome that. And when you've tried it for yourself and you've had your own personal experience, there's no one that can tell you otherwise because you know that in your system. So could you measure it with galvanic skin response? Could you measure it with, we've years ago, we worked with a Korean scientist who had some kind of fancy quantum physics energetic measuring contraption, and he was pretty blown away by the flower essences. And he was measuring what was inside the bottle. Could you measure it with the Kirlian camera or some kind of
Mm.
electromagnetic
Yeah, she's.
field or magnetic resonance imaging? Or, you know, probably you could. I think
Mm.
it's even more profound than that. And in the end, I'm like, recently I watched a movie, like a documentary film about homeopathy, and it was very science heavy and lots of studies. And I thought, actually, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like, I really just want to hear personal stories. And although, yes, I think the Western mind really wants to be able to measure things and see things and prove things. In the end, I just want like somebody to come up and tell me a story. And like, I believe that, like, that gets me to the core on a level that a study doesn't.
Mm,
So lately we've just been like, you know what? It'd be cool to do studies, but we're going to put that on the shelf. We're going to continue
mm,
to put that on the shelf and just keep asking people for their stories, because if it works, it works. And people tell people, and pretty soon, it's like this critical mass occurs.
mm,
Like, look at, like, when you and I were kids, essential oils were still kind of fringe, right? Like a hippie moms, maybe.
mm,
But now I feel like all moms know what lavender oil is.
mm,
So I think that we're just sort of moving from one realm to the next, where pretty soon it will be this more common experience of, wow, I tried this thing, it really works, and then it gets critical mass, and there you have it. Like, and will there be further measuring in the future? Probably. We're just not putting our focus there right now.
mm. My mum used to meditate in the 90s, and it was the weirdest thing ever. My dad used to tell her that she was being antisocial.
That's hilarious.
I'm antisocial. And now, but it was like she'd go to her room and meditate, and it was so weird. Like, I didn't think it was weird, but I think their friends thought it was weird, and it was just so. It's amazing how far we've come now. And now you got like Jeff Bezos meditates before he goes and cuts down another swathe of the Amazon. It's- Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, not your fault. But yeah, it's interesting how, and I love that. That's a really good point. Is that we think we need things will gradually they do carry. Look, meditation and yoga all have been also framed in that scientific lens for our obsessed Western science mind, the scientism of the God scientism we have here. But ultimately, I suspect most people just gravitate toward it because they hear their friends say, "No, man, you got to try it. My body, I've healed this, or I'm a lot calmer." And ultimately, is those stories that drive people toward trying something, or they've just tried everything else in it, and they're at the end of the road with say taking pharmaceuticals. Do you know Dr. Kathy Yao? Have you heard of her work? I think you'd really love her work. She's I had her on a few weeks ago, and she was just lamenting. She's been involved in quantum biology, but she was lamenting somewhat what you just alluded to, very much lamenting that you'll hear a certain bird sound outside, and we have to quantify to say that that's good for this part of our nervous system. She's just like, can't we just listen to the bird sound and appreciate how beautiful it is without needing to have a description for everything?
That's a really good point. I actually was just having a conversation about this with my spiritual teacher the other day, because we were talking about, well, we were actually talking about the Heart Sutra,
Mm,
and we were talking about like the Tibetan Buddhist concept of emptiness. And it came up because someone was asking, like, well, like, really, what does emptiness mean? And that's kind of like that quantifiable thing. And um, it's like the way he was saying, when you tell somebody this is what emptiness means, they have this thirst, and it quenches their thirst, and they become stagnant. It's like,
mm,
we want to know the thing, we want our question to be answered. The answer comes, and then there we stop, like the growth,
mm.
the word you're
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
into
yeah.
right now, but it stops at that moment. And then things become very stagnant. And I was thinking, well, that's so interesting. Like, what if somebody didn't know what the word red meant? Like what does red mean? And you could say, well, red, okay, like, is red just the color, or is red like the taste of raspberries in your mouth, or the red of like a sunburn on your skin, or the red of fire, or the red of, a beautiful bird flying by that gives you the sensation? Like, there's a lot more to it. And when you try to quantify everything, it's like you minimize it into this little box, and then it stops your curiosity and
Mm,
sort of like thirst for understanding something on a level that can't be quantified. And so I think there is some level of interest in things that are just mysterious, that push us along our path, and it's like I was taking I was taking a flower essence. We work with a new flower essence every month, and last month it was bamboo flower, which is super cool. Like, did you know that bamboo flowers? I had no idea
No,
until last
no.
year. I thought bamboo was just like a really tall, beautiful, fast-growing grass,
I've got
right?
some
That's
out
like a
here. I'm
tree.
looking at it. Yeah, I just sort of had the leaves that came, the green leaves. Yeah,
There
wow.
is, and there's the coolest thing about bamboo, which is that they have synchronous blooming. So there's thousands of different species of bamboo, but when one particular species of bamboo flowers, and some flower every 10 years and some flower every 150 years, when that one particular species of bamboo flowers, that species everywhere on the entire planet blooms all at the same time.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
this crazy magic. Now, like, if you try to, like, it's like I don't even want to do the brain work of trying to figure out why that is and quantify that. There's just the mystery of it is like, wow, that's so amazing. And I had this experience while I was working with that particular essence. And the essence of bamboo flower is to make things really effortless. It's like when Bruce Lee talks about becoming water. You're in the action, you're doing the thing, but it's just so effortless. And I noticed it most when I was cooking. Like I feel like in the Western world, the whole food concept is very different than in Asia. It's like you have to buy the vegetables and you have to cook,
Mm.
and it's this effort, and you got to figure out what you're going to eat. And it's like this whole efforting thing, right? And I felt like the bamboo flower was unlocking all those things. So I would be like cooking for myself and cooking for others and pushed to my limits, like, okay, I had planned to cook for 3 people for lunch and then I've got to get to the office. Oh, 2 more people showed up unexpectedly. Okay, I'll cook. And I just had this experience of like, I was frying anchovies, those little fish in a
Yeah.
wok. And all of a sudden, I've been frying anchovies for like more than 10 years because I really like Singaporean cooking. But in this moment, I had this like boom insight of like, as I was moving the wooden spatula through the anchovies in the wok, in the oil, I was like, I know when they are fried to the perfect point. I have a knowingness in that
Mm.
moment. Like all that time I've been frying anchovies and trying to figure out when they're done and are they crispy enough. And then I take them out. Oh, shoot, now I got to put them back. They're not crispy enough. Like these things we do when
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
cooking. In that moment, it's something just like, boom, I know. Like I can feel, I can see, I can sense. I have a knowingness when they're done. And it seems like just something so mundane and simple, but I but it's also like very mysterious. Like I can't transmit that to someone else. It came out of just doing it over and over and over and over and over. And all of a sudden, boom, that insight landed in. And I think there are so many things about life that way. And that's part of the mystery. And I don't know, it's like, there's just something like so magical about living life that way when it's actually not figure outable, quantifiable, boxable. It's just like, whoa, that's so cool.
I'm gonna have to introduce you to Dr. Kathy because I think you two are gonna get on like a house on fire. Because she said something. Well, you both have said the same thing, but you've languaged it beautifully in your different ways. But she said like her thing is like life is art, and when you're talking about that knowingness of frying the anchovies, it's an I worked as a photographer a lot of years, and I also did art photography. And when you're working with say a person doing portraiture, and you're working to you're just working towards something, you'd sort of be trying to get you I'm trying to be getting to right into their soul, like you're trying to be to disarm them, and then people show who they are in between the words they're saying. So in between the facade that we all have, there's this little weird little fucking moment where everything about them just comes through, and they're not when we're not aware of that beauty in ourselves, like that is a mystery to us. And that's what I was sort of honing in at, and I'm languaging it, but I had no words for it. But you just have a knowingness when you got it. You had a knowingness when you had created that space and you were in that space, and then next thing it was something magical could happen or
Yeah,
did
it's
happen.
like a realization, like an internal
It's
realization.
just this, yeah, and you were completely aligned with that other person too. It was just really synchronistic and like the bamboo flowering all over the world. Like both of you knew something magical had just happened and you couldn't quite explain it. So when you think of applying that to so many other aspects of the way we live, like say making cooking a chore because you're thinking it's only a chore because you think you need to be doing something that is more valuable in the future or then at that point in time, as opposed to what I'm doing right now is the most important thing. And how do I make that art? Or how do you're not that you don't even need to think how do I make it art, but being present in the moment is making it art.
Yeah, you are art.
Yes.
The
And
moment is
and
art.
and art is mystery. Like the art, and I'm not talking about the academic art that people like to have a thesis on the wall because you have no idea what the hell you're looking at. It's just an orange in the middle of a room. You're like, how long did that take you, buddy? Sorry, I don't like I don't like a lot of contemporary art. But if you, I remember going to see in the Tate Modern in London, and went. There's a huge room there with a lot of Rothkos, which are quite dense works. Like he was a tormented guy. But I just went into that room and they've got it's really interesting. They've got all these huge couches in the middle of the room, and I realized it was for a reason because I went into that room and I was just looking at his work and I had to sit down because I was floored. I was just floored by the energy and the depth and the mystery of this work, and that is art and that is life. It's like I don't want to then have a read a thesis about it. It's just it moved me so profoundly, and it stayed with me for days and weeks. That work is still embedded in my being somewhere. He did kill himself, so I hope it's not too bad. I hope it's the more positive attributes of it. But that's something I've noticed is trying to apply that presentness and that art and that mystery. And as much as my mind, I think we all want to know, like it is a mechanism of being human is to want to know and to try and dissect. But equally knowing when to apply that and when to leave it is key. Yeah.
In my experience, flower essences are such a huge support with that because you can
Mm.
catch yourself if you're just in a mental loop.
Mm.
There's a difference between like, I am thinking to solve a problem. I'm using my mental capacity to I have this problem and I'm going to fix it. Let's put our heads together and figure out how to solve this problem. Now you've created some tremendous benefit by using your mental skills to solve something. And then you have the like, the circles and then thinking, and I wonder, and did she look at me funny? And does it mean, and am I going to be abandoned? And am I really lovable? And that's like the conscious thinking, right? And then there's the
Yeah.
whole like river of stuff that's sort of underneath all of that motivates, and little fears that motivate why we do or don't do things or avoid things or can't make space for things. That's like a whole other level of thinking. And in my experience, flower essences will help us, if there's something like you said that triggers us. Flower essences create this little space. It's like this little moment rather than, our thoughts and triggers and emotions being like this fuel or this fire and they just like move through us and we act from
Mm.
that. There's a little bit of space and you see it as almost outside of yourself. Like, oh, there's a reaction happening. And then you can wait a beat and then decide what to do with that energy, which makes it so constructive and so helpful. I think, especially in the West, we don't have any tools for like, what do we do with intensity of emotion? What do I do with rage? What do I do with frustration? What do I do with grief that brings me to my knees and I just don't know what to do with it? We spend so much of our lives running away from, resisting, not wanting to feel things, not wanting to look at things. And when this like terrible, intense emotion arises, it gives us this false perception that it's going to be there forever. And so we're just like, how do I like block it and get away from it and numb it? Because I just don't even know what to do with it. Um, and like you said, other practices like meditation and breath work and flower essences can uh, help us just make more space in ourselves so that we can hold more intensity, so that we can see more things. And then in the end, all of that intensity really isn't us.
Mm.
We kind of identify with it, but that actually isn't who we are. It's like the storm passing through the sky. We're the sky. If we get comfortable enough to hold space to watch the storm and be with the storm and feel the storm and feel what the storm feels like, then the storm passes and then we realize like, oh, actually we aren't actually the storm. We are the sky. But until we make enough space to address and face the storm, we can't get a sense of how vast the sky is. Does that make sense?
Mm. No, absolutely. I find for a large part of my early 20s, I gravitated toward, I found that the esoteric bookshop in my hometown, which is the only one. And I pulled, and I was just really drawn to it. Actually, I might have been like, no, I was, it might have been a late teenager. And I went to the shelf, and the first book I pulled off without even, I wasn't looking. I felt this gravitational pull. And it was the Freedom from the Known by Krishnamurti, which is all about what you just said about you're the observer, you're the sky. He doesn't use that term sky, but it's the same overall acknowledgement of our true nature. That book fucked me up so badly. So because it was, because let me preface this with how, like, it's because I had nowhere, I didn't know how to implement what he, like, I read it, first it was revelatory because it pulled me out of my incredibly white bread suburban boring boxed upbringing which I experienced, of like, this is what life is. You go to university, get a good job, you buy the house in the same suburb, you get this kind of car, you send the kids to the same school, put a bow on it, then you grow old and hope you don't die too painfully. Which would be that was, there's other things that happen within that, but that was my overall. I just remember how to, I felt like intuitively I needed to get out of that loop. So I found, so that was an amazing thing to find, was to say, hold on, there's this whole universe of consciousness that I've never been exposed to, and that was the aperture, that was the start of that exploration. But it really messed me up when the thing that I couldn't understand at the time, which I've integrated more, is that yes, we are that awareness, that endless presence, that eternal awareness, observing, and this is somewhat of a play, or we're experiencing this incarnation. But what you said, I would then sort of negate emotional states or not embody who I really was, because I was trying to always maintain this I am just consciousness. So that's why it messed me up, because I was pushing away being a human being and not actually just living my life. And it really took me a long time to realize, yes, no, you want to really feel those feelings deeply and go through the grief and the sadness. And if you're feeling agitated or angry, not try to necessarily just get out of it, because it's not a constructive state, but just go, oh, I'm really fucking frustrated, and just let it move. But at the same time, a little bit of me also knows that it's okay. This will pass, and this is just a play. This is an act. You're acting this character for now, and it's a really great movie. Like, it's a
Mhm.
great movie. You're playing it really like you are that character. But I think I've seen people get stuck when they completely associate with the character.
Yeah, either completely associate with the character and make that solid, or like do, what do they call it? Spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the two ends of that polarity. Yeah.
And I mean, even if you just look at like gardens, like have
Yes.
you ever seen a compost pile?
Yeah. It's stinky.
Stinky, slimy, moldy, gross, like, just all the stinky, slimy stuff. But that's what's required for the most beautiful garden. And
Yeah.
when you get into that like stinky, slimy stuff that you don't want other people to see about you, it's like, actually, that's the most rich
Yeah.
fodder for, you get so much power out of that. You get so much power out of realization of clarity that comes out of your anger, like the boundaries, the clarity that comes from anger. You get so much realization out of the depth that you go to when you can allow yourself to experience grief.
Mm.
You get so much more compassion and understanding. Like, it just makes you a fucking powerful human being
Yeah.
that is relatable and wise, and you see so much more when you can allow yourself to experience all these different human experiences.
That, it's with that grief and those experiences, as you said, that's the most powerful thing, is you get an insight into other people's suffering. And the more you have that yourself, the more you realize, well, the more I've realized that it's just like, I have no idea what's going on in people's lives. So my only base default setting can be one of space and empathy for them, unless they are doing something particularly egregious toward me. But like, ultimately, people are reacting out of their capacity for the most part.
uh, reminds me of something that my business partner, she's been teaching a lot about in her meditation classes. And she says that in the West, there is this idea that we are sort of fundamentally flawed. Like we've got this, software downloaded into us that there's something about us
Mm,
that is fundamentally flawed and we have to work really hard to prove ourselves as good. We've got to work harder, we've got to work faster, we've got to be successful, we've got to prove, we've got to say, we've got to fix, we've got to do all these things, and sometimes it's in like it manifests as like a rushing energy. Sometimes it manifests as
yeah.
pride, so like all these different ways it can express itself. And if we allow ourselves to say like, actually, no, that's not true. I'm fundamentally good.
Mm,
I'm fundamentally good. And then in my mind, I'm like, yeah, like I'm a good person.
mm,
Like I'm actually a good person. And then when you're thinking of other people too, in terms of being compassionate for other people, it's like they're actually a good person too. Like I catch myself if I'm like frustrated with something somebody's doing, then I'll actually stop and say like they're a good person.
mm.
I'm a good person. And it kind of brings you back to that like fundamental ground of yeah, actually, we're all really good people. And there's somehow like when you actually try that on and you keep kind of trying it on, my business partner Lisa, she always says like think of it as the first thing you wake up in the morning and the last thing before you go to sleep, that I'm fundamentally good. And what does that feel like and how much space does it create in your body and what does it shift in your behavior? Mm, it's like the whole experience of life changes in a moment when we understand that we're fundamentally good and we don't have to work so hard.
Mm.
And like those practices combined with flower essences that are, working their way and showing you things about yourself, I think they're key. We need both. We need the tools from nature that stir us up a little, that catalyze, that help us see things we haven't seen before, and then to have those tools that we employ in everyday life to keep ourselves cool, and able to just weather whatever is arising is so important.
That, what you just said about being taking from the baseline of us being fundamentally good, I find that all the striving and all of the need for validation is what then screws our life up or makes us behave in a way that moves us from that fundamental goodness because we're willing to do any. When you're in that state of you feeling lack, is when you will do terrible things to fill that hole. So it's, and can I give you? I'd like to finish. I just want to find out you can finish what's happening with Lotuswei and what's coming next. But just in terms of an insight that I had, this is really quite profound since I've started taking the flower essences, and it's to do was I don't want to dox anyone. I'm happy. Just trying to think how I can phrase this without giving any identities away. But I had for a very long time had a very adversarial relationship with my father because he was overly disciplinarian and very strict, and he had a very particularly like boarding school when he was 5 or 8, so he had no maternal or paternal love, and he's done the best he can with some very limiting skills. But all I saw it was as a very rebellious young child was it was just a we just butted heads the entirety of our lives essentially, and I had for a long time been holding, unbeknownst to me, been holding resentment for that upbringing. I think we can all, particularly with parents, we can always view them as doing something wrong. But what I didn't realize was that resentment toward my father in terms of he didn't supposedly love me the way I expected him to love me or I thought I needed him to love me had manifested in me seeking I think we can all like seeking validation from him, which he would never give it to me in the way that I expected it, which then saw me seeking validation externally from the world. And it was just this completely covered up block in my life. And then I had another relationship which caused me to see the way I was behaving in a relationship with my father, which was somewhat as a victim. Like, you did all these things to me, you should have been this. And the insight came was, oh my God, okay, I'm not a victim. I suddenly saw he did his best and he actually gave me a lot of gifts so many gifts from the way that I've actually been tremendously, I don't want to say success, but I've had a lot of beautiful things happen in my life because of some of the things he'd given me far outweigh the negatives. And in that moment, when I saw that insight, that absolute clarity, like all the resentment and anger and hate and the things I was holding on to with him just disappeared. Just disappeared. Like there's no buttons to push anymore to do with that relationship. And I went and saw my parents, who are both quite unwell, but I saw them a few weeks ago. And usually it's horrific, like because my dad's he's a difficult man, and he'd be just throwing bards at me. He'd be trying to get, subconsciously, but he's looking for a response so that he's right. And there's like literally, I'm like the wind. Like everything he said, there's nothing there, and the only thing in me was I love you and I feel empathy for you and I'm here to help. And this not only has changed our relationship in the moment, like we've never had a relationship where we can talk to one another, and we now have that. Like I can call him and it's this really easy conversation. But I've just felt everything else in my life has just become it's so much easier. Like I'm not looking to be validated by anyone. I don't care. Everything I want to do in my life is just coming because it's something that I wanted. I don't want to say flow, but it really is this kind of flow state. So I'm not pushing up against a negative. I'm just sort of leading into the positive attributes of what I want to do. And it came from an insight, which I can only imagine. Like, I can't like. I want to say it happened during, like, so it's happened within the 2 months of these taking these flower essences. My life is like, I can't articulate how much that has changed my life, and how I didn't realize that holding on to resentment for just one person, like, and it wasn't heavy resentment. It was how much that was holding me back in every other area. So it's, it's so profound. Like I can't,
It's super profound. I had a similar experience while taking flower essences where I realized that this situation, I also was harboring resentment. It was like, wait a minute. If I really dial this back to the seed, I chose where to take birth. I chose which parents to take birth
yeah.
in. I chose my experiences. I chose a lot of the experiences in later life, like all the things I choose, and essentially it's like, I have created this.
Mm-hmm.
I chose this. I
Mm-hmm.
created this. I created this. I think that's just sort of a radical way of looking at things, because we're so used to blaming and this kind of adversarial, you did this to me, like, why am I in this position? Now I've got to just own it. I chose this. I have put myself in this position. I created this. I created everything I'm experiencing. That's that kind of radical self-responsibility that, like you said, it allows so many things to dissolve. And then also to say, like, okay, then if I'm experiencing something I don't want to experience, what am I going to do about it? If I've created this, I've even created this emotional reaction, I've
Yeah.
created everything, then I am the master of every experience I have. And what am I going to do about it? Am I going to just sit here and like blame and wallow and feel like shit? Or am I going to just shift it? Am I going to choose something different? Am I going to create something different? Because I've created this with incredible complexity and beauty. Now, what else do I want to create? It's such a game changer to just flip it a little.
That's the key. I think I left that off. That's the key. You go, when you take complete ownership of everything, everywhere you are in your life. And I don't want to speak, that's for me, because people go through horrific circumstances that I can't even fathom. And it's not to say, and there are definitely victims at different times where people could definitely be victims for 100%, of course. I just
Right,
want to
right, right,
caveat that because people can hear this
right.
and they can get a bit like, but the thing that I've noticed since that whole little long-term resentment had been released, I am now free. The radical creativity in my life is unhinged because it's like I created all this stuff that I didn't want, and it's brought me here, and I don't even resent that because it's brought me to this space now where it's like, oh my God, I can just create. Now I'm just creating. Like I'm just creating stuff that I'm a co-participant in all these relationships where I was previously blaming somebody. which gives you power, because then you have the power to respond differently. And then doing that changes that entire relationship in an instant, because the other person no longer feels that you're judging them or attacking them. It's,
So let me ask you a question then. In this experience of like releasing all this kind of stored, I think about it like with my phone, when you have like too many videos and
yeah,
audios
yeah,
and stuff stuck on your phone and you can't do anything with it because it's stuck.
yeah.
Um, in the experience of being able to release that resentment and um, stuff that you had from your experience growing up with your dad, what is now possible in your current relationships? Have you seen an expression of something that
All of,
surprised you? All of them.
yeah, all of my relationships now, particularly the ones, no, look, I generally have pretty good relationships with people because they don't have that sort of history of, uh, yeah, when the more history you've got, obviously, the more loaded that relationship can be, because you've harbored, particularly if you haven't communicated that resentment to them. But I will say, with people who are the close relationships, those ones, the people who have those sort of emotional heartstrings on you, they're so much better, all of them, because I'm not. As soon as you get out of that thing of where you're blaming another person for your emotional state. So you said this, so now I feel like this. You can still have boundaries and say what you said wasn't cool. Like, that made me feel, in the moment a certain way. I'd appreciate it being different. But you're no longer attacking the person. You're just saying something happened. I I just feel clean, because it's not. I don't take it personally. It's more, as we were saying before. If something happens, I'm actually more concerned about that person if they're acting out in a certain way. I'm like, oh my god, what's going on with you? Like, I won't say that in the instant, but I'll be like, I'm just thinking, oh, there's something going on with them, because it's not, but there's some, and it's just space opens up to respond and to let your genuine love for that person emerge.
What flower
So
essences have you been taking that have during the last 2 months when you
the
had this insight?
hold on, they're literally on my counter. Hold on, one sec. Yeah, this will be interesting to see what. Yeah, ironically, I have infinite love and I have fierce compassion. So there you go.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that, because I didn't. They got this nice, pretty labeling on the front, but I couldn't until you asked me that. I wasn't actually paying attention to the names.
So interesting. There's a flower inside Infinite Love called fireweed. And it's
Yeah.
um it grows after forest fires. Like it actually needs that really intense heat to crack open the hard shell so that the seed can
Wow.
propagate
Yeah.
and grow. And it's what we call a pioneer species. So it's one of the first flowers will come in after natural disasters like that and heal the environment and heal the animals and the people and the trees and everything around. Um, and that flower essence is in Infinite Love, and it's that same kind of thing. It's like the heat, we needed the heat, we needed the anger, we needed the resentment, we needed these sort of like traumatic experiences to like crack the shell of our heart to be able to recover and soften and take the intensity off what we perceived the experience to be, and to be able to forgive ourselves and forgive the other person,
Mm.
and to allow more love in, essentially allow more love in for ourselves and for the other person. And then there's a really fun flower in fierce compassion called hollyhock. And that's always really helpful when there's someone in our life that we're just like, oh, my relationship with that person is just kind of like, I don't want to say hopeless, but maybe sometimes we think it's hopeless because we're just like irritated by that person and we don't communicate well. And it's just like, it's just never going to change.
I just
It,
assumed. I was no. I was just going to, like, not only hopeless in the case of my father. I just assumed he was going to die, and that was. I had made peace with the fact that that was our relationship, not realizing that there was potential for change. So in terms of like the scale, it was as far down. Like, I was ready for it to go to the grave, with this scenario playing out because it was so adversarial. So it's like I can't let people know, like, if you have that in your life in some way, this is as bad as I could imagine a relationship could be. It was the worst relationship in my life I'd ever experienced. To now where it's like I view him as someone I dearly love. Of course I always loved him, but I can express it, and he's a dear friend. That's in the space of for, you know, a couple of months, but like, a few weeks in terms of seeing him.
And also, yeah, I mean, what's going to happen long term? Because that softness and that love and that unconditionality and, his behavior being the same, and he's just met with this tsunami of softness and gentleness and tenderness and love and acceptance and unconditional everything from his son. That is so fucking disarming, you
Yeah, it
know?
is. Yeah.
And I think it will be really interesting to stay in touch and just hear from you personally what evolves over time with that particular relationship, because it shows you how powerful you are. Because when we shift something inside of ourselves, it simultaneously shifts in both directions. So if we have children, it shifts in our children. If we have parents, it shifts in our parents, and it goes both ways in the lineage, and it happens simultaneously and immediately. And that's how much power we have. It's like your dad could be the most resistant person on the planet, and like he cannot resist your transformation because you're inextricably linked and interconnected in so many ways, not just, by birth and biology and cellular memory and quantum physics, and that transformation and the art and the mystery of it is like unstoppable.
I also love it takes, I didn't need to go to 6 months worth of counseling once a week. All this, it was instantaneous because the insight was so clear. It's just, it's amazing when you hear of, it's the same with like miraculous healings. It's just, it's all of a sudden the clarity of what was causing the illness. For example, the body just responds immediately to it. And as you said, I even had a conversation with my dad last night, and usually it leads, I don't want to bore people, but it leads down a certain path about a certain topic that he's very passionate about. That's just painful to listen to. He didn't even go off than that. He was just being quite chirpy and chatty. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, what's happened to you? But it was me, because I'm no longer meeting him with the same energy that he was expecting back, or judgment, all those things. Yeah, as you said, that's how worlds change.
And that's just the beginning. There's infinite capacity for more depth and expansion and growth in along those lines in that
Mm,
realm.
yeah.
You may be even more surprised what happens or what's capable of happening. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad. I just wanted to share. It's just,
It's huge. You
oh, it's
did
beyond.
that. You did that. You did that. That was you.
But that's what I was saying when we started, though, the clarity of seeing something. It's very hard, particularly if someone else points it out too. It usually just pisses you off. You're just like, I don't, because you take it as an attack when you're in that state of mind,
Right.
particularly of a victim, or that this is out of my control. I don't have the, or no, it's because you don't think you have the power to change it or the capacity. And give me 6 months ago, I didn't have the capacity to change it because I was still in the mindset of this is yeah, I was being attacked. And I don't know. And you got to, how do I release that? If you told me how to release it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It's just something shifted in me. Can't measure it, can't really talk about it, but something just completely shifted in me.
And that's the amazing mystery and magic and power of the flower essences is their capacity to just gently, 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 like kind of jiggle us enough
Yeah.
to where we can align with our highest potential in that moment. Because it's in there, we've got it. And then, the static kind of disappears, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's clear. It's so clear.
Yeah. The word I'll say is free. Like you either want to hold on to those states of being or you want to be free. And I can tell you, like, freedom is a lot better feeling than wanting to be right or hold on to this previous identity of yourself because you felt wounded. It's it's a lot nicer. Yeah. Katie, I'm so appreciative. Thank you for your time. Do you want to just give, sorry, we haven't really touched about what, just give people a quick, like, what are you up to with Lotuswei, or how can people find you, get in touch? I'll put everything in the show notes, but if there's anything you want to touch upon before I leave you alone.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really grateful for your story. There's nothing more important than that. Like that story is so that's so exquisite, and that's all anybody ever really wants to know about is that like human potential and that vulnerability and the rawness and the insight and the knowingness and how brilliant you are. And I just I'm so grateful that you shared that.
Oh, no, thank you.
And what are we up to? We're opening us, we just opened a company in India. So we are exploring the realms of e-commerce and events and wildness in India. We have this self-rising nature center in Phoenix, which is a wellness center offering
Yeah.
classes and workshops and events. And we're doing a flower lounge tour, and we're doing events all over. And there's so many things coming in the future. And, in the end, all of us on the team are just 100% devoted to connecting people with the next flower that's going to be the next key to their own inner awakening. And we're here to be of support. And whoever's listening, who's curious, who wants to jump on a call or DM or email us or whatever, we couldn't be more happy to receive you and connect you with the right flowers.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for your time. Thank you for 2 decades of dedication to manifesting this. I can imagine it's been a very, at times, difficult journey, but yeah, changing one person at a time.
I make wishes that we may be able to meet in person in Australia or India or wherever that might be. It would be great
I
to
do
benefit
too.
humanity.
I'd
Thank you
I'd
so much,
absolutely
Paul.
love to come to the center. Thank you, Katie.